Lay down and relax. I shall read to you. Ah, you've come back to me again, little human. Good. Tonight I shall take you someplace your dreams rarely wander, not because it is unimportant, but because it is uncomfortable. Medieval Britain is remembered in your world as a place of noble knights, glowing castles, and roaring fireplaces. You see it through paintings and tales, softened by distance and imagination. But I remember it fresh and wet and raw, soaked through to the bone with wind and worry. I curled my wings above those isles long before your ancestors learned how to write their fears down. I watched them struggle, love, starve, march, and pray beneath skies that were rarely kind. And if you had walked where they walked, little human, you would have found the ground far less forgiving than your soft, modern world. Come then, sit by my fire. I will not frighten you. I will only tell you the truth gently, before you drift too far into dreams, little human. A small favor from an old dragon. If you've enjoyed resting here beneath my wings, consider subscribing to my hoard of stories. Each new believer helps me gather more treasures and avoid ravaging cities for loot when I'm low on funds. I'm retired now, and my back makes sounds that haunt even me. Now, back to the story. A land that fought its people. Britain in the medieval age did not welcome its people. It challenged them at every turn. Rain fell with a devotion few dragons would respect. Wind gnawed through clothing and into flesh. Even in summer, the air carried a bite. Winters came often and lingered long, bringing dampness that soaked into bones and refused to leave. Crops struggled against soggy fields and cruel frost, and when they failed, hunger followed close behind. The land was beautiful, yes, but beauty does not feed you. It can only watch while you starve. You would wake each day, wrapped in cold, dressed in wool that never fully dried, and step into a world that smelled of mud, animals, and smoke. Comfort was not expected. It was a rumor. Homes that could not protect you. You live in walls that keep out the weather, little human. Medieval walls did not. Homes were crowded and poorly built. Many were no more than wooden frames packed with mud and straw, with thatched roofs that invited rain rather than repelled it. Floors were dirt. Vermin were neighbors. Rats, fleas, and lice were not signs of filth. They were part of life. Animals slept beside people, not out of affection, but necessity. The fire smoked far more than it warmed, coating lungs and ceilings alike in soot. Privacy did not exist. Darkness was complete. Cold was stubborn. Despite your desire for cozy cottages and roaring hearths, you would find medieval homes to be more like sea vessels in permanent storms, leaking, crowded, and threatening to collapse at any moment. Food that rarely loved you back. Food in medieval Britain was not a pleasure. It was survival in its plainest form. If you were wealthy, you ate meat and spiced dishes. If you were not, you ate what you could grow, what had not spoiled, or what you could afford. Bread was often coarse and heavy. Vegetables were seasonal and unreliable. Meat was scarce. Clean water was not guaranteed. Wine and ale were safer than rivers, because fermentation did not carry disease. But hunger lingered anyway. Crops failed. Winters were long. Famines were common. Malnutrition turned cheeks hollow and bellies hopeful. You, with your endless choices and midnight snacking, would struggle in a world where food was rationed by cruelty. A kingdom of illness. Disease ruled medieval Britain more absolutely than any king ever did. Plague walked freely from village to village. Smallpox and flu erased families. Dysentery haunted water. Childbirth was a gamble played with bone and blood. Medicine was mostly guesswork wrapped in prayers. Doctors believed sickness came from imbalance or divine anger. Bloodletting borrowed life rather than preserving it. Infections went untreated. Pain had no relief. Death was a familiar visitor. And the worst of it was not the dying. It was the waiting. Living each day knowing that any cough could become your final conversation with the world. You, who panic at a fever, would tremble beneath medieval survival. A world ruled by position. Justice in medieval Britain was not blind. It could see rank clearly. If you were noble, law protected you. If you were peasant, law punished you. You did not belong to yourself. You belonged to land, and land belonged to lords. Taxes crushed families. Serfdom trapped generations. Crimes were punished with physical loss, hands, fingers, sometimes life. Trials were brief and brutal, and innocence was not a defense. You could be accused, tried, and punished in the same hour, and there would be no appeal. Only silence. Knights were not stories. Knights were not storybook heroes. They were trained weapons clad in iron. War was frequent. Raids were merciless. Villages burned quietly. Crops were trampled without apology. Castles provided protection, but also drew danger. When war arrived, it did not knock. It devoured. Children learned stillness early. Fear grew like another limb from the body. Peace was a pause between disasters, not a guarantee. Faith and fear walked hand in hand. The church offered comfort and terror. Heaven glowed as a promise. Hell burned as threat. Every disease, crop failure, or storm might be punishment. Witches were blamed. Women suffered more often. Words became dangerous. Knowledge was controlled. Questioning faith could cost you your life. Belief filled the gap where science had not yet arrived. You would live beneath invisible watchfulness, fearful not just of kings and knights, but of God himself. Cleanliness was unknown. Bathing was rare. Soap was precious. Waste flowed openly. Water was reused. Teeth decayed quickly and endlessly. Toothaches, infections, and rotting gums were expected companions. You live in a world cleaned by design. Medieval Britain lived inside its germs. Work was survival. There were no weekends, no vacations. Children worked, elders worked, hands cracked, backs bent. Collapse meant replacement. You worked because hunger would not forgive rest. Winter punished weakness. Summer extracted labor. Fatigue was your inheritance. A world without silence. You treasure solitude. Medieval Britain was never quiet. Families shared beds. Rooms echoed with breath. Animals lowed inside walls. You were constantly observed, overheard, surrounded. Loneliness existed, but never peace. Fire was a visitor, not a servant. Fire in medieval Britain was not an obedient thing. It was kept, feared, fed, and mistrusted. A hearth could warm you or suffocate you, depending on the mood of the chimney. Thatched roofs were invitations to disaster. One spark could take an entire village into the sky before dawn. There were no alarms, no engines, no organized rescue. People woke to shouting, smoke, and collapsing beams, dragging children into rain and ash while their homes burned behind them. I watched fires sweep through towns like wolves through sheep, and when the smoke cleared, there was nothing but char and memory. If you lived then, little human, you would keep one eye open even beside your own fireplace. Travel was a trial. Movement through medieval Britain was slow, violent, and uncertain. Roads were mud veins through forests and fields. Bandits waited patiently in hedges. Wolves followed travelers in silence. A broken wheel or injured foot could earn a death sentence from exposure. There were no maps that mattered to you. No inns promised safety. Each journey was a gamble with claws waiting to collect. You live in a world where movement is comfort. For your ancestors, movement was threat. Childhood was brief and hard. Children did not play freely. They worked. They watched siblings die. They learned fear early and hope sparingly. Many never reached adulthood. Disease claimed the young without ceremony. Hunger hollowed them. Education was rare. Innocence was short. You guard children carefully now. Medieval Britain rarely could. Weather was war. Rain was not romantic. It was relentless. Floods erased homes. Wind stripped fields bare. Snow buried villages. The sky dictated survival. You consult forecasts. They endured omens. And when weather turned cruel, it did not apologize. Death was ever present. Death in medieval Britain was not hidden away. It was known, seen, and accepted. Bodies lay in homes. Graves filled churches. Mourning was constant. And yet people lived anyway. They married, laughed, and dreamed in defiance. Language was a wall. Words in medieval Britain were not gentle bridges between people. They were walls. There were no shared tongues across the land, no common voices to soften conflict. Dialects changed from village to village. Latin ruled the church. French ruled the nobility. English hid in the mouths of the poor. You could walk a single day and no longer understand the world around you. And with misunderstanding came mistrust. A stranger was not a curiosity. A stranger was danger. Your accent could earn a beating before your story earned a hearing. You live in a world full of translation and instant understanding. They lived in a world where not being understood could end you. No, little human. You would not survive medieval Britain easily, but the ones who did. They gave you this world. They froze, they starved, they endured, so you could sleep warm. Do not envy their hardship. Honor it. Now rest under dragon wings. Good night, humans.